Let me introduce Chad Burke. Mr. Burke has served as the president and CEO of the Economic Alliance since 2009. Chad serves on a variety of community boards and committees, including Texas Economic Development Council, Gulf Coast Economic Development Council, and the Harris County Houston Sports Authority. Please join me in welcoming Chad Burke.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to come and speak today. I saw the audience when I walked in and saw my good friend Jim up here, and it's always more nerve-wracking to present in front of your friends. And so I've got a lot of friends here today, so it's a little bit different than I normally get. But we'll walk through it real quick. So I was asked to let me see if I'm. Where do you want me to point, Joe? No problem. I was asked to provide a skills gap. Is that you or me? Okay, there we go. I was asked to provide really kind of a good look, a quantitative look into what the skills gap is right now, and that's a hard question to put a number on. And so I was talking with Ron a little bit about that, and I said, look, I can give you an anecdotal look into what we're seeing here along the Houston Ship Channel. So what I want to do is I'll explain a little bit about what we do, which gives us insight into what's happening along the Houston Ship Channel, and then dive into some of the reasons that are driving a skills gap here in the petrochemical and then supply and logistics part of the country. And then we'll take as deep a dive as we can into what specifically that looks like for the petrochemical industry, and then touch on the supply chain a little bit in this region. The Economic Alliance is a regional nonprofit economic development corporation. It's a mouthful, but really we are a group that has one mission, and that's to add capital investment in our footprint. So we are competing for those capital investment dollars, primarily in the manufacturing of specialty chemicals, and then the refining, and then the supply chain that supports that. So for us to be good, to be competitive in that area, in capturing capital investment, we have to be really good at some surrounding things that give us that insight into what's going on. So we have to be very good at public policy, which kind of sets the ground rules for the ability for our companies, like LyondellBasell and Dow and INEOS and those folks to be successful. We have to create an infrastructure that moves product and people through this region in a way that is competitive to other port regions around really specifically for us, the entire Gulf Coast. We have to be really competitive in workforce development, and that's really one of the main reasons that we're here to talk. We'll dive into that. But then we also have to create a quality of life for the communities that surround this area, so that workforce is accessible. So you have, in our footprint, you've got 12 different cities surrounding the Houston Ship Channel that are the primary producer of your workforce. And if people don't want to live there, then you have to reach farther and pay more for people to come into your region. So that's part of the equation as well. So this is a little bit about the footprint that we're in. It's everything that goes in and out and surrounds the Houston Ship Channel. It's 250 private member companies. It's those 12 cities. It's Harris County. It's the Port of Houston. You can see the impact that this region has on the state and on the nation with the number of jobs that it creates. So no small driver as far as jobs and economy. So I'll touch real briefly on economic development. We call this the life cycle, and I have to explain this. This audience will understand this better than most of the ones that I get to talk to. So the petrochemical manufacturing is really the engine that drives the entire economy around here. When you're making things, you're creating indirect jobs to support that. In all of the economic sectors, manufacturing has the highest indirect job creation. And within manufacturing, petrochemical manufacturing is the highest within all of those manufacturing sectors. In fact, it's, according to the American Chemistry Council, it's over 7 to 1. It's moving up to almost 8 to 1 now. For every job inside the fence at David's plant, there are 7 jobs created to support that. And if you work in this industry, you understand what all of those specialties and contractors and labs and everything else that goes into that. But the way the cycle works is the manufacturing creates the jobs. The jobs create the retail and the housing demand. That drives imports because we consume a lot of finished goods that aren't manufactured in America anymore, right? We're trying to change that, but there's a lot of manufacturing that happens overseas. We consume that, but to do that, we have to import that. Every time you get on Amazon and hit buy now, there's probably a container moving from the other side of the world to this side to bring that over here. Interestingly enough, Port of Houston, with its manufacturing, is the only port in the country that exports about as much goods as it imports. We were 50-50. We're about 55-45 now importing rather than exporting. But what that does is that gives us empty containers that we turn around and put product in and ship it right overseas. That gets made into something that we're going to turn around and import back here. So it's a complete life cycle. And we're the only port in the country that has the ability to do that because we make things here, right? And all of that goes back into driving those jobs that we create in this region. So this is a report card. If we had a report card at the Economic Alliance, this would be our report card over the last 14 years now. You can see pre-2010, kind of the pre-shale revolution, that there wasn't a lot of investment going on in the petrochemical footprint here. But once the shale kind of revolution took hold, by 2011, you started seeing really, really massive investments along the Houston Ship Channel. You can see that averages somewhere around $2 or a little over $2 billion a year. Those are just the projects that we work on at the Economic Alliance. We did a survey about 6 years ago, and it looks like we touch about 25 to 30% of the projects in the region. So these numbers can get really big really fast, especially over the last decade. But you can see that those jobs created number goes over 3,000 jobs. Those are direct jobs inside the fence, and then you multiply that times 7, and you begin to see really kind of where the demand comes from. This is an example of last year's project announcements that we worked on. You can see all 3 of them are in the petrochemical industry. 750 retained jobs, 100 new jobs, and again, multiply that times 7, and you got 700 new jobs created just because of these 3 projects. A pipeline is always, if you're a salesman, you're trying to fill your pipeline all the time to get things to fall out the other side as wins. This is our current project pipeline, 23 projects, a little over $6 billion. It's jumped a little bit with some federal grant money that is coming down into this region that is probably, we're going to win some of those projects. But you can see very robust project pipeline for us. This is our finger on the pulse of what's happening in the region. And we watch this pipeline and those total cap dollars kind of rise and fall with different economic factors that inject into the economy. Port of Houston activity mirrors what's happening in the manufacturing side. So I wanted to touch on this just a little bit. We are the #1 exporting and energy port in the country, and we're the #1 exporting port because we're the #1 energy port. So I mentioned how busy we are. We're also the #1 container port in the entire Gulf region, moving over 70% of the containers that move in and out of the Gulf of Mexico come right through the 2 container terminals here at Barber's Cut and Bayport. You're looking at a picture of the Bayport container terminal. Pre-COVID, I don't think I have a laser, but is it? It's the top button? There we go. Oh, look at that. That is fancy. Okay, so here's your ship channel out in the middle of the bay, and you've got all your cranes at the dock, and again, this is the Bayport container dock. Pre-COVID, about right here, you would start to see empty space. But as you get farther away from the dock, you can see these stacks of containers get taller and taller and taller and taller. This is, in my life, I have never seen this many containers stacked up at Bayport. Here's Port Road right here, right? So that every inch of their property is full of containers because we have started moving more and more and more, specifically since COVID. So much so that they have run out of. Now I'm just trying to advance. There we go. They've run out of space. And Chad Carson in the corner over here is our VP of Economic Development, who manages all of our projects. We have gotten inquiry after inquiry about space to be able to store containers, and the port has gotten so busy that they just, I think, more than doubled their cost to keep a container there. They give you about 7 days free once it comes off a ship, and after that they start charging you. It used to be something nominal like $7 a day. I think it doubled or tripled, just so they can try to get containers to move out a little bit quicker. So those numbers look like this. Container volume from 21 to 22, to the end of 22, went up 14%, almost 4 million TEUs. TEUs is a 20-foot equivalent unit. That's half of a 40-foot container. That's just the way that they measure them. They doubled the volume in 6 years from 2016, nearly 500,000 TEUs more than 2021. So the growth has been astronomical. And the interesting thing is that they average between 8,000 and 9,000 trucks a day going in and out of the two terminals. And that feeds into some of the workforce demand that we're seeing out there. So what does an economic development corporation do in workforce development? We don't, industry has jobs created by some of those factors that we've seen and that we'll talk about. Community colleges have the curriculum and the training facilities like this one we're standing in. When working with all of our partners, we saw that there was a gap in the fact that there's really nobody out there marketing the careers. There's nobody out there that was pushing people into that pipeline. And so, Patty Bell, why don't you raise your hand or stand up for us out there? So Patty Bell is our workforce development coordinator, and what she does is fill that marketing gap. She partners with the colleges, with the industry, with our high schools around the entire region, and she markets those careers. She works with all of our partners to find out which are the high demand, high paying, hard to fill, and she goes out with volunteers from industry, pushes that information into the local high schools. So that's kind of how that works out. The numbers that she has been able to produce are staggering in my mind. So this is last year. She had 64 different presentations, 72 school districts touched, over 7,000 students reached, volunteers from 9 different companies. And you can see the total running numbers that we've touched since we started this program back in 2016. About 7, almost 8 years ago, East Harris County Manufacturers Association did a survey of all of their companies, and the results came back, and it was pretty telling. But one of the questions that I thought was really interesting, that really drives this initiative, is that they asked current employees in the petrochemical industry how they got there, how they found out about it, and how they heard about it. And 85% either had a direct family member that worked in the industry, or they had a very close family friend that worked in the industry. And if you didn't have that connection, you don't really know about this industry. There's not a lot of marketing of this industry and these careers really anywhere but along the Houston Ship Channel, and it only comes from friends and family. So our marketing attempt is the effort to try and spread that word to a broader base of potential candidates and workforce to push into the pipeline. There are a lot of people around the greater Houston. When we travel anywhere west of 610, a lot of people don't realize we even have a port, much less a petrochemical industry, right? And certainly the kids don't know about it. So that's what Patty does. That's what that team of volunteers and network does, is really market the careers, open those doors so that students realize how to get there, and what those careers can do for their life and their family down the line. So a couple of quick things. I'm not a demographer, but I know one, right? So y'all have probably seen this. This is the age graph of the United States, right? This is our population pyramid. Most pyramids from most countries are literally, they call them pyramids because they're shaped like pyramids. This one looks like a spire on the Taj Mahal because of 2 really obvious bumps. First, the baby boomer bump, and then they have this echo bump that happened a generation later, right? So normally it's thin at the top and then just steadily widens out to the bottom. But if you look at this closely, if you're 60 and older, which is retirement age, right? We've got a huge bump of people that are about to retire, right? Another way to look at that, and well, let me back up. I'll say one other thing. So if you've got a guy or girl in the plant that's between 55 and 59, and they're thinking about retiring, and they're going to say they're going to retire at 60 years old, and they've been out there for 35 plus years, right? Went to work right out of college, right out of high school, been working there for 30 years, and they're ready to retire. The next best bump of workforce is 25 to 29 years old. Do you think that 25-year-old, and I heard some of the comments Jim made, do you think that 25-year-old is going to have the knowledge and experience and just wherewithal to help run your facility that 55-year-old that's fixing to walk out the door? So this is what we're facing when it comes to experience in the facilities. Another way to look at it, the number of Americans age 65 and older will more than double, reaching 80 million in 2040 from 2020. So that's pretty significant. So my good friend Danny is here, who is, I'm going to say, in charge of the HR Ship Channel Managers Group. And because we have a great relationship and with her and our members, we're able to tap into some of the knowledge from human resources managers out there. Now, this isn't quantitative. This is just this is anecdotal. But we did a short survey, and we're still in the middle of this survey. But I wanted to put some of the real consistent themes that we've already begun seeing. We asked 5 simple questions. The first question was, which disciplines are in high demand today inside facilities? I&E instrument technicians, operators, obviously, that process tech, millwrights, and then chemical engineers. So you can see what's in demand right now. The next question was, what's it look like the next 3 years? Is that demand going to continue to grow, or is it going to decrease? What's that look like? And there's no decrease in demand over the next 3 years. That matches up with the project pipeline that we see that Chad Carson works on. And then we're saying, okay, well, what's the trend looking like? Okay, what's the average time to fill for hourly and salary positions, and anywhere from 2 to 3 months to fill a new position. I don't know about you, but if I went out without one of my key people for 2 to 3 months, that's staggering, right? I mean, that's not a short fill time when you're trying to run a facility or a company, okay? And then has that average time to fill increased or decreased over the last 3 years? And unanimously, that time is increasing and expected to continue to grow, which is not a good sign. And then finally, and again, I heard Jim touch on this a little bit this morning, but we asked him, okay, what are some essential skills that are missing on your candidates? And not to generalize, but I thought these answers were really pretty telling. Troubleshooting, critical skills thinking, problem solving, and mechanical aptitude. I know San Jacinto College just hosted a troubleshooting competition, kind of a nationwide troubleshooting competition. How many teams competed, Jim?
So we had 30 compete, and then we had finals with 12 top schools across the nation.
Very nice. So 30. So Stacy from Ineos asked a real interesting question. Who won? Well, I think San Jacinto College came in first and second, and then our local, I think College of the Mainland, right down the road from us, grabbed third. Is that right? So we got some really good instructors and some really good students, new potential employees working in this region. So troubleshooting, critical skills thinking, those are the types of things that we're missing right now, and that's a deep dive. If you want to dive into that, that's an entire cultural conversation about why we are there. But we have to realize that so we can begin to address that. I told you I'd touch real briefly on some of the careers and shortages we have surrounding our petrochemical industry and the supply chain. You remember I told you that the container volume went up 14% in 1 year. It's gone up double digits for about the last 3 years now. But in 22, it went up 14% to almost 4 million TEUs. We have about 8,000 truck drivers trucks a day, which equates to about 4,000 truck drivers. They average about 2 turns a day going in and out of the port. This is just the stuff that moves in and out of the port. This is not all the goods that move to all the 200 private docks in the petrochemical industry. These are containers. Normally, well, I didn't put this slide up there, but 60% of these containers, 60% of the containers that go out of the Port of Houston include resins and chemicals. So 6 out of every 10 boxes going out comes from this industry. So we have 4,000 drivers, and you put a 14% increase in that in 12 months, and you're short immediately 560 truck drivers. That came straight from Roger Gunther at the Port of Houston. I mean, you can't get away from the fact that we don't have enough people trained to move products fast enough. And that was in 2022. They're on pace to do that again in 2023. So that's just a reflection of kind of what's happening out there. I have a son that works in the maritime industry on a boat, driving tugs, pushing these ships around full of either liquid products or containers, whatever it is. In Q1 of this year, they gave their entire staff, their entire workforce that works on the water a 25% increase just to try and retain the people that they have, because their competitors along the ship channel are trying to cannibalize them, right? So that's a hard indicator of what that demand is and what that shortage is right there. So real quickly, in summary, if you want to kind of peek into what's happening, the real takeaway from our insight is that we're looking at a 40% increase in retirement age by 2040. 2040 seems a long ways away, but it's 17 years. I mean, by then, you saw the curve on our population. That entire bump is going to be retired inside of 15, 17 years. Combine that with well over $100 billion in new capital investment along just our Houston ship channel, the 25-mile reach right here, and then double that number along the Texas and Louisiana Gulf Coast. Okay, that's the investment that has increased our production capacity in the last 10 to 12 years. So you've got a huge wave moving out of the workforce. At the same time, you have unprecedented growth in production and need for personnel and trained workforce. All of that capital investment, as I showed on the little circle of life, drives population. You can see a 1.5 million growth here in this region since 2012. That drives imports. That creates supply chain shortages all through the entire supply chain, not just in the petrochemical industry. So that's the key factors that I wanted to take away. The drivers of that skills gap, and then a little peek anecdotally into what some of those key jobs are that we're missing right now. And then what we're doing at the Alliance and with ECMA and with our community colleges and all of our school districts to try and push people into the workforce, or the supply of workforce, the training of our workforce. So with that, I think that is it. I'll entertain any questions, but if not, I'll say thank you very much for having us this morning. So appreciate it.
Any questions? Okay, great.
All right, thank you all very
Chad,
much.
thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. So great work. I mean, just to see how many schools that Patty and team are touching. I mean, that is the future. Being able to get out to those schools, 7,000 students, and let them know about manufacturing. Used to be big 20 years ago, and it seems to have fallen off the radar for a lot of young folks. Hey, Chad, we have a question, maybe for you or Patty. The question is, when you're out talking to those 7,000 students, do we have any idea how many of those end up being interested in joining manufacturing?
Patty, was it like 752? Is that the number? No. So one thing that we do, so that's a great question, right? And we've wrestled with that over the years that we've been doing this, is we try to quantify everything that we do. You can see a lot of the numbers. If you can track it, you can improve it, right? So we track everything that Patty and her team does. How do you tie a marketing, so things that we track number of presentations, we track number of volunteers, we track number of people touched, we track the demographics of every presentation so that at the end of the year, we've got a complete look at the demographics that we are reaching to. So we want it to match what's in Harris County, right? We want to be introducing this job sector to people that haven't had a chance to get into it before, right? So we track all of that, all the way down to, we have previously, about every 2 or 3 years, we'll go back to our community colleges and we'll see what is your enrollment numbers looking like. So we kind of track where the colleges are, and that's a loose tie, but then you can see, okay, over the first 5 years of this, numbers of process tech degrees doubled, from some of our partner institutions. There's one way there's really only one way that I think is useful to track, and at each of her presentations now, she will take contact cards to students that say, okay, if you're interested in these careers, here's a card, fill out this information. We will immediately get this to the counselors at San Jacinto College, at Lee College, at HCC, depending on where we are when we're talking to students, so that you can give them a chance to then be called directly by somebody here at an institution that says, yeah, we've got this degree plan. It's, you've got X number of hours, in dual credit already. Yeah, it's going to take you 12 months or 18 months or 24 months to get this degree. It's going to cost you $5,000 if you don't get any financial help. And the starting salary is $70,000 at the end of it. So they really tie that together, right? So do we know exactly how many students have been gone through, heard from her, gone through the system, and then gone out? It's nearly impossible to track that number, to quantify it. But you track everything else, and then you kind of believe that you're making an impact in what's being pushed into the pipeline. Yeah.
Okay, good, thank you.
P.T. Barnum of Barnum and Bailey fame once said that he was convinced 50% of all advertising and marketing was a complete and total waste of time and money. Somebody said, why do you still do it then? I don't know which 50% it is.
No, that's good. You never have. It's going to be almost impossible to tell exactly who you're touching, but when you do, you've changed someone's life and you've helped our industry at the same time. You've put someone who may not want to go to a 4-year college, but hey, I can afford to go to San Jacinto College, CPET, and work during the day. And Jim will tell you this: most of their students have some sort of job, part-time or full-time, and are doing this to try and change their lives. So you're changing people's lives. At the same time, you're really supporting the industry that supports our regional economy. So,
No, absolutely. It's a definite need here and across the nation.
here's a question.
Are you tracking the graduation rates and which programs are the students graduating from and where they're going?
So I know that San Jacinto College does. So and I've heard those numbers, but I don't want to speak for Jim here at San Jacinto College. But I know they track them. They track their graduation rates, and then they even track. They contact them, and they know the salaries that they're making after they get out. You want to comment on that real quick?
Paul?
Oh, there you go. Perfect.
So graduation rates of colleges around the nation, it's a disappointing number. You may know that, and I don't have it in my hip pocket, but it's less than 50%. It's not good. And then when you look at the percent of that 50 that actually take a job in the area that they're trained in, it's about half of that. So it's not a good number. We're proud of our numbers here. They're significantly better than that. Our starting salaries average $67,000. We track our students at years 1, 2, 3, and 4. We know where they're employed, and we know how much money they're making. They average over $100,000 a year. Our graduates here, about 40% of those land with an owner, operator. About 45% are with contractor. So that leaves about 15% with others. So yeah, employment is nearly 100%. Graduation is statistically better than the national average. I think we're at about 64%, which is still not as good as we need it to be. What happens with a lot of our students is they land a job before they finish their degree. Not all of our contractors and owners require an associate degree, so some exit a little bit early. Although we would prefer them to graduate, we're really happy when they land the job, obviously. So those are some of our numbers. I'd mentioned to you 80% of our students are part-time, but I want to let you know what that looks like. 80% part-time, they graduate in 2.4 years. So they get an associate degree, 60 credit hours in 2.4 years. So they're averaging 9 credit hours a semester, and they're with us in the summer. We're as busy in the summer as we are in the fall and the spring.
And Jim, what's the average age of your students here?
Yeah, average age is 27.
Yeah.
right? So if you would sit in on our any one of these 77 courses, and by the way, you're all invited. We love it when industry members come in and sit in on a laboratory course and give some coaching and give some feedback. Yeah, you'll see somebody that's dual credit, 16 or 17, sitting next to somebody that's 40. Yeah, it's and a little bit about our students. It very much reflects our population in the area. About 63% are Latino, and that's our largest demographic, and that's exactly what our footprint in our community looks like.
Good, thank you. Any other questions?
And that was something you just mentioned dual credit, and that was something I was wondering of what programs do you have with the high schools as far as offering dual credit programs?
So, anybody of y'all in this audience, were you a dual credit student? Yeah, I wasn't either. I wish I would have been. I don't know if they had it back in the day, but yeah, as a college, I think our number is 14% of our students are dual credit, but not as much in our programs here. So, what our college looks at, about 60% of our students that are at St. Jack has 30,000 students. About 60% are targeted to go on to a four-year university. University of Houston is number one as far as quantity. Number two, Texas A&M. Whoop. All right, okay. UT number three. So probably not surprising, those are the big three, but that's 60%. But our students here, 99% of them want to get a job with Chip at Dow, right? Or any one of the companies in the industry. They're looking to take this degree and get a job. There's a few percent that go on and get an engineering degree, but the majority want to be a technician in the industry, but not necessarily. We of course meet and talk to all of our students. We do a lot of career counseling, resume, mock interviews, all that stuff. About 70% want to stay here around the ship channel, and about a third are willing to move wherever. We've had students work in Alaska, North Dakota, all over the country. So about 30% of those are portable, which isn't surprising because of our student population here. A lot of them were not born and raised in Houston. They may have moved here over time. In fact, I took a look at our student count, and it's about 400 different high schools. So yeah, I mean, all over the nation, right? Because people move into Houston.
Good,
Did that
thank you.
answer